Okay, so we all run into this sometimes, right? You hear about a show like some really intricate world and you think, that sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But 16 episodes plus like specials and stuff, who really has the time to watch all that, just to get like a basic understanding of what's going on?
Yeah, I totally get that.
And this is one of those cases, I think, with this series, Ling Long Incarnation, or a.k.a, if you want to get really fancy with it.
Right, and what really strikes me about Ling Long Incarnation is that it's had this journey, right? It premiered back in 2019 as a Chinese animated series, made by YHKT Entertainment and put out by Bilibili.
Right.
And it's really become this global phenomenon. Like, people are talking about it everywhere. And the thing that really gets me is, like, it's not just some small group of fans who are really into it. The season 2 preview video that they put out in 2023 got over 1 million views so fast.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, it just shows you how many people are already invested in this story and how much it's resonated with folks.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for you, the listener, that's what we're here to do today, to give you the rundown of what Ling Long is all about.
Exactly.
Like, this is your crash course in the world, the characters, the themes, the whole deal, without having to commit to a full watch through,
Yep. We're diving deep into everything. We've got all the articles, the reviews, all that jazz to give you the essentials.
And to give you some context, too, we're going to be talking about this from a global perspective.
Absolutely.
We're not just focusing on, like, the Chinese reception of this.
Yeah.
We want to see how this has impacted things on a global scale.
Right. It's really fascinating to see how a story from one culture can connect with people all over the world.
Exactly. So, are you ready to dive into this kind of shattered future?
I'm ready when you are.
All right, let's do it. So first things first, let's talk about setting.
Okay, so picture this Earth, as we know it, but completely wrecked by some cataclysmic event. Ecosystems are gone. Pretty much everything's a wasteland. And the only place humans have left to go is this massive floating structure called the Lighthouse.
Oh, wow. So it's like this beacon of hope, this tiny little island of civilization hanging over this ruined world. Pretty intense imagery, right?
Exactly. It really drives home the fragility of humanity, in this situation.
Yeah, totally. But down below on the surface, it's not just empty wasteland, right?
Oh, no, not at all. What they have down there is called the mana ecosystem, and it's like this bizarre, almost alien landscape. It's filled with these glowing plants, which sound beautiful, but also these incredibly dangerous creatures like spine goo and devourer beasts.
So it's like beautiful but deadly, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And that duality, that contrast between the sterile safety of the lighthouse and the vibrant but lethal world below, that's like the foundation, the backdrop for the entire story.
So it's like humanity is caught between a rock and a hard place.
Exactly. Threats on all sides.
Yeah, intense. So how does the story actually get going in this world?
So the narrative mainly follows this guy named Mark, who's the commander of the hunters.
Okay, and who are the hunters?
Basically, they're the brave souls who have to go down to the surface to scavenge. They're looking for supplies, anything that the people in the lighthouse need to survive.
Right. So it's not just sitting pretty up in the lighthouse. They're actively having to fight for their survival.
Oh, yeah. It's a constant struggle. And early on in the series, like, one of the first scavenging missions goes horribly wrong.
Oh.
One of Mark's team members gets infected with this mysterious virus, starts showing all these crazy violent symptoms, and they have to make this desperate retreat back to the lighthouse.
Yikes. So it's like danger lurking around every corner.
Absolutely. And this incident is a real wake-up call for everyone. It shows that there are these unknown threats out there that they don't understand.
Yeah, and on top of all that, it sounds like the lighthouse itself isn't exactly a paradise.
The lighthouse isn't some utopia where everyone's equal and happy. It's ruled by this really rigid, authoritarian organization called the Light and Shadow Society.
And what are they like?
Well, they enforce this strict class system that divides the upper-level citizens from those that they call the dust folk. And the dust folk basically get the short end of the stick. They're treated as inferior.
So it's like built-in inequality.
Exactly. And it's a major source of tension in the story.
Right. So you've got this two-pronged conflict going on. The external struggle against the environment and the creatures down below.
Right.
And then this internal struggle with the social inequality within the lighthouse itself.
Exactly. And those two things are constantly intertwined throughout the series.
Yeah, and what are some of the events that really kick off the main conflicts in the story?
Well, one of the big things is that Mark, as he's going about his duties, he starts to uncover a dark secret about the lighthouse, its origins.
Oh, what's that?
Turns out it wasn't always a sanctuary. It was originally built as a prison.
Wow, that's a huge twist.
Yeah, it completely changes your perspective on things.
Totally. And The sources mention something about Mark's death and transformation, like he becomes this Mark Dragon.
Right. That's a pivotal moment in the story because it leads to all this upheaval in the lighthouse. Like, it challenges everything they thought they knew about their world.
So it's like a catalyst for change.
Exactly. And it really sets up the rest of the series.
Okay, so speaking of the rest of the series, it's pretty long. How is the story structured?
So it's broken down into 3 main parts. The upper season, which came out in 2019 and had the first 6 episodes.
Okay.
Then the lower season, which came out in 2020 and had another 6 episodes.
Okay.
And then the finale, which wrapped up the first storyline in 2021 with episodes 13 through 15.
So each part builds on the previous one.
Yeah, it's all connected and it gets more and more complex as it goes along.
Okay, so let's talk about the characters now. We've already mentioned Mark. He's obviously a key player. But what else could you tell us about him?
So Mark, voiced by Lee Yuan Tao, he's really at the heart of the story. You know, he's this incredible fighter, a natural leader, the kind of guy everyone looks up to. But underneath all that, he's wrestling with this inner conflict.
Oh, what kind of conflict?
Well, he's torn between his loyalty to the lighthouse and his growing desire for freedom. You know, he wants something more than just survival.
Right.
And as he learns more about the lighthouse's past, that desire for freedom just gets stronger. And his transformation into Mark Dragon, well, it's not just physical. It represents that whole struggle that he's been going through.
So it's symbolic.
Exactly. It's like the culmination of his journey.
Wow. And then there's Ram Bing, his second in command. She seems pretty cool.
Yeah, she's awesome. Ran Bing, voiced by Tao Diane. She's this amazing sharpshooter. She's super calm under pressure, even in the craziest battles.
Okay.
But she's not just some cold-hearted soldier. She's also incredibly empathetic, especially towards the younger dust folk on the team.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and her ultimate sacrifice merging with Mark, it really shows her unwavering loyalty and love for him. It's one of the most powerful moments in the series.
It sounds heartbreaking.
It is, and it really speaks to the depth of her character.
Yeah, and every good story needs a strong antagonist. Tell me about Charles.
So Charles, voiced by Liang Dawei, he's the son of Morgan, the guy who runs the Light and Shadow Society.
Like,
He's basically the embodiment of the Lighthouse's elite. He truly believes that the upper citizens are meant to rule, and he'll do whatever it takes to maintain their power.
sounds like a real piece of work.
Yeah, he's pretty ruthless, and over the course of the series, he goes from this spoiled aristocrat to this full-blown tyrant.
So he's not just a one-dimensional bad guy.
No, he's complex. His motivations are tied to the social structure of the lighthouse and his own sense of entitlement.
Right. And what about some of the other characters? The source mentions a few others who seem interesting.
Oh, yeah. There are a bunch of great supporting characters like Bai Yuikui, voiced by Xie Yike. She leads a group of survivors who live outside the lighthouse, down on the surface.
Interesting. So they've chosen to live in that dangerous world.
Yeah. They're trying to make a life for themselves outside the lighthouse's control. And then you've got 4068, voiced by Xu Jing. He's a dust folk laborer who starts off as kind of a traitor, but his story hints at the possibility of redemption.
Okay, so he's a bit of a wild card.
Yeah, he is. And then there's Morgan, voiced by Zhang Wei. He's the founder of the lighthouse, but he's got a lot of secrets, the dark past that comes back to haunt him.
Sounds intriguing.
And finally, there's Ink City, also voiced by Zhang Wei. He's one of the hunters, and he's totally loyal to Mark. His character shows the strong bonds of friendship and camaraderie that exist within the team.
It sounds like the creators really put a lot of thought into developing all these characters.
Definitely. They each bring something unique to the story, and they help to explore the bigger themes of the series.
And speaking of themes, let's talk about those covers. Ling Long seems to tackle some pretty heavy stuff, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. One of the main themes is this tension between survival and humanity,
Like, what do you have to sacrifice to survive?
Exactly. The lighthouse is so desperate to keep humanity going that they've implemented all these crazy rules like gene optimization, breaking up families, controlling reproduction, all in the name of survival.
Wow. So they're basically stripping people of their basic rights and freedoms.
Yeah, and Mark really pushes back against this, especially when it comes to the forced pairings in the Donghua. He believes that people should have the right to choose who they love, and that human connection is about more than just making babies.
So it's a conflict between the needs of the many and the rights of the individual.
Exactly, and that's a really relevant theme for our own world, too,
Yeah, definitely. And another major theme is the class struggle that we talked about earlier.
Right. The way the upper citizens exploit and oppress the dust folk, the way Charles uses his power to maintain the status quo, it's a clear commentary on real-world social inequalities.
And it reminds me of stories like The Hunger Games, where you have this clear division between the haves and the have-nots.
Exactly. It shows how power can corrupt and how those in charge will often do whatever it takes to stay on top.
Yeah, it's a pretty timeless theme, unfortunately. Now, I came across this term schwanpunk when I was reading about Ling Long.
Yeah.
What exactly is that?
So schwanpunk is basically this fusion of science fiction and schwanwan, which is a genre of Chinese fantasy that often draws on Taoist philosophy.
Okay, so it's like a blending of Western and Eastern ideas.
Exactly, and it's what makes Ling Long so unique. You know, a lot of Western science fiction is very focused on technology and materialism, but schwanpunk brings in these Eastern philosophical ideas about balance and harmony.
And how does that play out in the story?
Well, you see it in the contrast between the Lighthouse and the mana ecosystem. The Lighthouse represents this artificial order, this attempt to control nature, but the mana ecosystem is this wild, untamed force that represents the natural order of things.
So it's like technology versus nature.
Yeah, and schwanpunk suggests that you can't just rely on technology alone. You have to find a way to coexist with nature to achieve balance.
Right, that's a pretty powerful message, especially in today's world where we're facing so many environmental challenges.
Absolutely. And then you also have the themes of sacrifice and redemption, which are woven throughout the story.
Yeah, like how do those play out?
Well, you see it in Mark's transformation and Ranbing's sacrifice. They both give up something incredibly important for the greater good, and their actions challenge the Lighthouse's whole idea of survival at all costs.
Right, so it's like they're showing that there's more to life than just staying alive.
Exactly. It's about finding meaning and purpose even in the darkest of times.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And beyond the story and themes, Ling Long has also gotten a lot of praise for its animation and overall production.
Oh, yeah. The animation by YHKT Entertainment is absolutely stunning.
Like, what makes it so good?
Well, they use these advanced 3D rendering techniques and motion capture, so the movements are incredibly fluid and realistic, especially during the fight scenes.
Okay.
And the way they depict the mana ecosystem with all those bioluminescent plants, it's just visually breathtaking.
Wow.
And even the character designs are really well done. You can tell a lot about a character just by looking at them.
Yeah, that's impressive. And the series has won some awards for its animation, right?
It's won the Gold Dragon Award and the Hubei TV Animation Award, which are both really prestigious.
So it's definitely top-notch stuff. And what about the music and sound design?
The soundtrack by Yang Bingyin is fantastic. It really adds to the emotional impact of the story.
Okay.
And the theme songs like Incarnation by Jane Zhang and Snowman by Zuziki, they've become really popular among fans.
And the voice acting is good.
Oh yeah, the voice direction by Huang Ying is excellent, especially Li Wantao as Mark and Tao Dian as Ranbing. They really bring those characters to life.
So it sounds like Ling Long is firing on all cylinders. Great story, great characters, amazing production.
It really is, and it's no wonder that it's become such a huge hit.
Yeah, so how popular is it exactly?
Well, when it first debuted on Bilibili, it got millions of views right out of the gate.
Wow.
And by 2021, it had racked up over 1 billion total views and millions of subscribers.
That's insane.
Yeah, and the hype for season 2 is through the roof. Like we said, that preview video got a record number of views.
So it's definitely left its mark on people.
Absolutely, no pun intended.
Uh-huh. So to give our listeners a taste of the story without spoiling too much, can you talk about some of the key plot points?
Sure. So in the first part, the upper season, the failed mission in the very first episode is really important because it introduces the viral threat and shows how dangerous the surface world is.
Right.
And then later on, around episode 5, Mark discovers the truth about the Lighthouse's past, that it was a prison, which really shakes things up.
Yeah, that's a big one. And what about the lower season?
Well, in the lower season, you have a lot of intense battles with the mana creatures, especially around episode 9, which highlights the constant struggle for survival.
Okay.
And then episode 11 is a huge turning point because that's when Mark gets infected and transforms into Mark Dragon.
Right, and that sets the stage for the finale.
Exactly. And in the finale, episode 13 is really emotional because that's when Ranbing sacrifices herself and Mark confronts Charles.
Wow, and how does it all end?
Well, in episode 15, Mark meets Bai Yu Kui, and it leads to this kind of emotional awakening for him, which provides some closure to the first part of the story.
Okay, so it sounds like it's a pretty wild ride.
It is. There's action drama, romance, philosophical themes. It's got it all.
So let's talk about the cultural impact of Ling Long.
Yeah.
The sources suggest that it's really resonated with people both in China and around the world.
Yeah, it's really a groundbreaking work in Chinese animation,
In what way?
Well, a lot of successful Chinese animation in the past has been based on traditional folklore, but Ling Long is original science fiction, which is pretty rare.
Oh, interesting.
And the creators deliberately gave it an English title, Incarnation, which I think shows that they were aiming for a wider audience.
Right, they wanted it to appeal to people beyond China.
Exactly. And the themes that it explores, survival morality, the human spirit, these are all universal themes that can connect with people from all different cultures.
And some people have even compared it to Japanese anime, like Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah, in terms of its thematic depth and its global appeal.
So it's really putting Chinese animation on the map.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is that it also touches on some contemporary social issues,
Oh, like what?
Well, things like rapid urbanization, environmental destruction, inequality, these are all problems that we're facing in the real world. And Ling Long kind of reflects those issues within its dystopian setting.
So it's not just escapist entertainment, it's making a statement.
Yeah, and it's been praised by the People's Daily for its message of a human destiny community, which aligns with China's vision of global cooperation.
Wow, so it's tapping into some pretty deep stuff.
Yeah.
And the fan community must be pretty big, right?
Oh, yeah, it's huge. There are tons of fans on platforms like Bilibili and Weibo, and they're creating all kinds of content like fan art and theories and discussions.
So it's really sparked people's imaginations.
Definitely. And the fact that people are still so excited for season 2 after all this time shows how much it's resonated with them.
Yeah, that's a testament to its quality, for sure. So, to give our listeners some context, how does Ling Long compare to other popular science fiction and dystopian shows?
That's a good question. Well, if you compare it to something like Attack on Titan, they both feature these walled societies that are under threat from external forces.
Right.
But Attack on Titan tends to be more bleak and hopeless, whereas Ling Long, while it's definitely dark, does offer a glimmer of hope, and it focuses more on the ecological aspects of the conflict.
Okay, interesting. And what about The Expanse?
Well, The Expanse is all about space politics and interplanetary conflict, whereas Ling Long is very much grounded on Earth, but it has this unique Schwanpunk element that sets it apart.
Right, that blending of science fiction and Taoist philosophy.
Exactly. And then if you look at Akira, which also has this dark, futuristic vibe,
Yeah.
Ling Long is much more philosophical and it's deeply rooted in Chinese culture, whereas Akira is more about this kind of chaotic energy and cyberpunk aesthetic.
So it seems like Ling Long really carves out its own niche within the genre.
Definitely. It's not just a rehash of familiar tropes. It brings something new and fresh to the table.
Now, every show gets its share of criticism. But what have people said about Ling Long?
Well, the overall reception has been overwhelmingly positive. People really love the complex characters like Mark and Bai Yuekui, and they appreciate the way it incorporates Chinese cultural elements.
Right, so it's being praised for its originality.
Exactly. But some viewers have said that the early episodes are a bit slow-paced.
Okay.
And there have been some minor criticisms about certain plot points, like the power dynamics between Charles and his father Morgan, which some people felt could have been developed further.
So it's not perfect, but the good seems to outweigh the bad.
Definitely. Even the criticisms are mostly about pacing and minor plot details, not about the overall quality of the storytelling.
Right, and the awards speak for themselves.
Oh, yeah. It's won a bunch of awards, like the Gold Dolphin Awards, the Gold Dragon Award, and the Hubei TV Award.
So it's definitely gotten recognition from the industry.
Yeah.
And there are some official sources that have praised it too, right?
Yes. China Radio International has commended it for its cultural depth, and the People's Daily has highlighted its message of a human destiny community.
So it's being recognized for its artistic merit and its social relevance.
Exactly. It's more than just entertainment. It's a cultural phenomenon.
Okay, so before we wrap up, there's an FAQ section in the source material. Are there any key points from that we should highlight for our listeners?
Sure. Well, just to recap the basic plot, it's about Mark's journey in this post-apocalyptic world, his discoveries about the Lighthouse, and his transformation into Mark Dragon.
Right.
If you're interested in watching it, you can find it on streaming platforms like Bilibili and Donghua.
Okay.
The main characters to keep an eye on are Mark Rambing and Charles.
And it's probably not suitable for younger viewers, right?
Yeah, it's definitely geared towards a mature audience due to the violence and some of the themes.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
And that unique Xinonpunk element is something that people should pay attention to.
Absolutely. It's what sets Ling Long apart from other science fiction shows.
And is it worth watching?
I'd say yes, definitely it's a deep, complex story with amazing visuals, and it explores some really interesting philosophical and cultural ideas. Just be prepared for a bit of a slow start in the beginning.
Right. And how does it compare to something like The Three-Body Problem?
Well, they're both produced by YHKT Entertainment, but Ling Long is an original story that focuses more on human relationships and cultural identity, whereas The Three-Body Problem is more hard science fiction.
Okay, so they're both great, but in different ways.
Exactly. And that Xuanwen pump aesthetic, that blending of Taoism and science fiction, that's what really makes Ling Long special.
Yeah, it sounds like a truly unique experience. So to sum up, Ling Long Incarnation is this captivating dystopian story with complex characters, stunning visuals, and a deep exploration of what it means to be human, all set within this fascinating Chinese cultural context.
And it really makes you think about the balance between technology and nature and the ethical dilemmas we face when it comes to survival and the way we organize society.
Yeah, those are big questions that we're all grappling with in the real world.
Exactly. And Ling Long provides this really thought-provoking lens through which to examine those issues.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to chew on today.
I hope so.
This has been a deep dive into the world of Ling Long Incarnation. We hope you've enjoyed this exploration, and until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and we'll see you on the other side.
See ya.